to the GT3. Man, it feels good to be back in this thing. I know there's been quite a lot of content recently with the GT3, mostly because I spent a solid week in Germany with it, Nürburgring, Dusseldorf, hanging out with Misha at Apex, etc. However, there was one very small segment of that journey which ultimately inspired me to create the video you're watching right now, which was the mention of the no-lift shift when I was driving from Dusseldorf all the way down to the Nürburgring. More on that in a minute. Effectively, what I'm going to cover now, because it seems to be a topic which, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to have that much coverage or exposure in the press, or in the, when I say the press, I mean the automotive media landscape. Not saying it's newsworthy. It's just interesting that even when I was researching these cars, I didn't come across too many people talking about the no-lift shift. I'll speak about that shortly, but I want to talk about effectively that this manual gearbox is like 3 gearboxes in one. So I'm going to run through the 3 different ways that you can drive the same gearbox, which ultimately makes this car very engaging as a road car, and if you watch the Nürburgring content, even as a track day car. So, operation and general interaction stage 1 is just as a pure, raw, normal 6-speed manual gearbox. The 6-speed is the interesting thing because effectively this is exactly the same as the otherwise 7-speed PDK gearbox that the Generation 1 991 GT3 launched with. But with the manual gearbox, there's only 6 gears. What that creates is, in effect, slightly longer gearing, or a feeling of longer gearing when you're driving this car. I did find, having spent 18 months and 10,000 miles with my previous PDK 7-speed automatic GT3, that the lower down response of the gears in those cars felt a little bit sharper. They were a little bit snappier, a little bit more responsive. In this car, very low down, you do feel like you could benefit from being a cog lower than you might otherwise be in the PDK car. The engine, after all, is derived from effectively the 991 Generation Cup car. So this is an actual race car engine in a road car, but the Porsche, being the masters of the manual gearbox that they are, have done an incredible job of mating it to this situation down here. And so what's it like to interact with? Well, as you would imagine, the gears, the actual actuation of it with your hand is a wonder. It is, as I keep referring to it amongst friends, sort of snick-snacky. It's a very short throw. You sort of stir it with your wrist, really. It's not so much long arm throws as it is wrist maneuvers. But the interesting thing about it feeling slightly longer geared is that you can hold on to it for quite a while. 9, as I do it build, 9,000 RPM. And then, of course, there is the interaction not just with your hands, but of course with your feet. Now, one of the reasons that I swapped out of the 7-speed auto into the 6-speed manual is because I just wanted the operating window of performance to be just brought down just a notch. Now, while in theory these cars should be the same speed on paper, and they damn near as well be, there's something about interacting with the manual box which just makes the enjoyment more accessible at lower speeds. It's not actually the speed itself, it's your personal enjoyment and engagement with it. Now, in terms of the pedal placement and the interaction between you, the cogs, the physical shift stick, and the actuation of the pedals, it's developed by Porsche, so it's sublime. It's attached to that incredible motorsport developed GT3 engine, and it still sings all the way to, importantly, 9,000 RPM. Now let's switch to what I would class as gearbox mode 2. So conveniently, on the transmission tunnel down here, there's a button called Sport. When you press that, a little LED comes on, lit up in red, to indicate that you are now in sport mode. So what does this do? Well, it effectively removes a layer of engagement in a strange way, because what this now does is rev matches for you. It's in effect heel and toe downshifts for you. So the computer knows when I depress the clutch in sports mode and I go down a gear, it rev perfection. Now, on the one hand, it's a great thing if you're feeling lazy, and the actual interaction with it itself is very impressive. I mean, it's the most accurate, most dialed in heel-toe downshift you could possibly ever execute. Because it's not you executing it, it is in effect the computer. So just listen to this 1 second while I go from 5th down to 4th. Then to 3rd, then to 2nd. None of that auto-blipping, or should I say none of that blipping was me. That was the car doing it all for me. And upshift stay exactly the same. You're changing gear as normal, depressing clutch, but it's the downshifts. One more time, this is not me doing any rev matching at all. It's spot on. Back into 4th, back into 3rd. You can very rarely catch it out either. It gets it every single time. Now, the purists, and even myself included, would say that, well, you've gone and bought yourself a manual car, and then there's this button down here that sort of de-manuals it and takes it that step closer to PDK. And from a road driving point of view, I would agree with you. I have, however, cheated a few times and experimented with this button on track. When you're learning the track, it's amazing. And particularly, for example, say you're not that au fait with the principles of heel-toe, or even your technique isn't exactly right, and you're in the process of learning a circuit and learning your technique. It's a really nice driver aid just to remove that one layer of interaction that you could otherwise do without while you're hurtling at 150 miles an hour towards a hairpin bend. That's pretty handy stuff. Equally, if you just don't want a heel-toe, it'll do it for you. And it's impressive. It nails it every single time. Look, 5th to 4th, blip, 4th to 5th, blip. I can understand the appeal, and I understand why it is quite addictive, and as I mentioned, I have tried it on track, but on the road, that button, to me, defies the purpose of really buying the manual car. So 99% of the time, I just don't have it on. If I'm learning a circuit, I'll try it, and then after a lap, I'm like, okay, cool. Now then, let's go to stage 3. And this, for me, is the #1 feature, the no lift shift, that really hasn't been widely discussed. I don't know why it is, because as a feature on a manual gearbox, it sort of hybrids this whole system and bridges the gap almost between a manual and a PDK. This is almost like a sequential feature, right? So let me just try and explain it before I demo it. So if you have experience in driving a manual car, you'll know that by instinct you depress the clutch, and here's the important bit: remove your foot from the throttle pedal. It's instinctful. Left foot goes down on the clutch, right foot comes off the accelerator, and the arm changes gear. And then off comes the clutch and back on the accelerator again. Not with flat shift. Flat shift goes against any cognitive foundation you have about a manual gearbox. You literally have to forget it all, because it feels like you're about to smash your gearbox to pieces. Because you shift, listen to this, without lifting off the throttle, hence the no lift shift. Sounds good too, doesn't it? No lift shift, rolls off the tongue wonderfully. So here's a demonstration of the no lift shift. So, pay attention with your ears. Are we ready? Flat shift, no lift. Crazy feature. I mean, it goes against everything you've ever done in a manual car. That is the opposite sensation. It's the maddest thing. And you don't have to be flat. It just feels crazy and flat. 5,000 RPM, no lift. That was completely no lift at all. And so, as we work our way up these features, the irony of it is, it's getting it to every step closer to a PDK gearbox, isn't it? Everything's just getting more refined, more precise, more just sort of race car, really. Of all of those features, though, the rev matching for me, it's cool to witness and feel, but it does remove an element of interaction for yourself. But the flat shift, because there's not really any skill in lifting your foot and then changing gear, I mean, everyone does that. There's never been a function like this. It's the coolest thing, and it feels so race car. And when your car's hot and you're really on it, every now and again, it lets out this amazing whip crack. I can't replicate it because I've only found it on track when I'm going absolutely ballistic. But it's when everything's just super hot and it's just letting out this angry flare, and it's so cool. It even does it when you're at sort of 70-75% throttle. Sometimes I've done it because, once again, I'm in lazy mode and I'm wanting to flat shift. The car's quite hot, I might have just had a spirited drive, and then I flat shift, or should I say 3/4 shift, and it lets out this sort of poppy whip crack motorsport noise that I've never heard from the PDK car. It's the only time that I've heard this engine make that sound, is every now and again. And because it's every now and again, it's so rewarding. You're just like laughing to yourself while you're in the car on your own. It's quite a weird sensation, but I absolutely love it. And so these are the features which I wanted to explain, which seem to not have been fully documented. They're mentioned, but I'm not sure if there's ever been any dedicated content on it. Now let's just do it all in one. So sport button on, auto rev match, and flat shift. Flat shift! And then downshift. That was me then. I just let off the throttle. Sometimes your instinct just takes over and you just can't help lifting off because it just feels so bad to just smash it home. But anyway, so auto blip downshift, flat shift, 9,000. I mean, as far as an exercise of calibration goes, it's mind-bendingly cool. The accuracy of each interaction there, both rev matching and flat shifting, is very cool. But what it does for me, it just adds so many more elements to this car than it just being your standard stage 1 6-speed manual gearbox. There's something in this for everyone. And then if you want to step that a little bit closer to PDK, you can turn on these systems and be not far off, actually. It's a mega piece of calibration. There's the difference between your conventional manual shift and your flat shift. The manual was the first shift, the flat shift was the second shift. It's not quite PDK, but it's not far off. And that's the beauty of this car, isn't it? It's just a different proposition. And so those are the attributes that I refer to as being the 3 gearboxes in one of the Porsche 991 GT3. Let me know in the comments below what you think. I particularly would like to hear what you think about the auto rev matching. I know for the purists that's often a bone of contention, but for me, it's not always on. It's there if you want it. If you don't want it, just turn it off. Or as the case may be, just don't turn it on in the first place. It's only available when sport button's on, and that's all it affects. It doesn't affect the sort of stiffness of the suspension or anything like that. It's purely the auto rev matching. And then you got your flat shift, and then you've got just drive it like a normal manual car. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're enjoying the channel right now, please be sure to subscribe. Also, if you do subscribe, please hit the bell next to the subscribe button, because that will send you alerts when new content actually goes live. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time. Ciao!